Hey, welcome to Q&A, where you ask your questions and I do my best to answer. Got a great question. In some ways, I think it follows on. Well, it does follow on from a recent Q&A where we talked about the difference between entertainment and worship. This is the question. Loved your video on entertainment versus worship. My question is, what role should emotions play in worship? Like using lights, etc., to create atmosphere. And it's a good question. It's a valid question. I get where it's coming from. I get that behind this question is that sense that maybe some of the stuff is coming out of entertainment rather than worship, and where is the line? And so let me offer my perspective on that, because I want to say that when it comes to what role should emotions play, we need to recognize that emotions are very much a part of who we are. And if we accept the scriptures that say that God fearfully and wonderfully created us and knitted us together, that we are created in his image, then the emotions that we have, as corrupt as they may be, are nevertheless how God made us. They are in some way a reflection of God's character. And so therefore, emotions are very real and should find expression in our worship. I think that's why, for example, in Mark chapter 12, Jesus, when he's talking to the disciples, said, you should love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your soul, because he's saying you should worship me out of your entire being, and that includes emotions. Again, I think of Psalm 42, as the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs for you. A beautiful picture of how for the psalmist that to draw near to God and worship is that there's an emotional longing. There's a sense of I want emotional connection in an appropriate way. And I think that's biblical. I think it's necessary. I think it's a good thing, because what we're doing is we are engaging as fully as we can with God who created us, God who knows us, God who's aware of everything that we're going through. So to pretend we're okay when we're not serves no purpose. And in fact, in worship, we should be coming together to acknowledge that our relationship with God. And so we should expect emotions to play a part within that. In fact, worship is a celebration of the goodness of God, the hope of God. And so we should expect emotions to play a part within that, because it's an expression of who we are. I think the problem is that when we think of emotions and worship, and I think this is probably connected to the question, is we tend to think in terms of contemporary music. We tend to think in terms of darkened auditoriums, lights and all that. And really, is that bordering on entertainment? Well, I want to say that if lights and all that may not stir you, but they may stir others. At the same time, some people's emotions are stirred by a good choir. Some people's emotions are stirred by beautiful old cathedrals and buildings where they're in a place which has been reserved exclusively for the worship of God and for no other purpose. It was built and has only been used for that. And there's a sense of atmosphere that you just step into. And for that, it engages people's emotions in worship. Stained glass windows that tell the story of the saints. I think that's a valid way of engaging emotions in worship. So for me, the question is not should emotions ever be part of worship. It's how. How do we engage our emotions in ways that help people connect in a meaningful way with God rather than a non-manipulative way? And I think that's the critical thing, a non-manipulative way. So for me personally, I think that good worship should seek to engage people at several levels. It should seek to engage people at a visual level, because we're stimulated visually. I think that's why some people like stained glass windows. Some people like lights. Some people like pictures on the wall and things. And, and some people even like icons. Think of, I know it's a touchy subject, but some of those classic depictions of the saints and of God. And I know we can get hung up on them, but some of the good ones, one of the things that we miss is that I'm thinking, for example, of some of the things like Rubens' icon of the Trinity. If you look at that style of iconography, there's a picture, but the vanishing point is an affinity, so to speak. It's taking you beyond the picture into something else, because the whole purpose of creating it was not to draw a picture, but to treat it as an opening, if you will, of heaven, to draw you into the presence of God, into heaven, to express heaven in ways that draws you. So I think that visually worship should engage people, and how that is done is, I think, reflects the style of the congregation, the style of the church, and the community that represents, and on it goes. And I don't think we should pit one against another necessarily. I think for me also, good worship should engage us at an oral level. By that I mean what we hear. And again, it's a stylistic thing. I don't have a problem with contemporary music. Equally, I don't have a problem with hymns and all that sort of stuff either. I think that it's purely a preference. The music is a means to draw us into the presence of God, to help us connect and engage with God at a deep level. As Jesus said, love the Lord your God, to worship him, you could say, with all of our heart, with all of our soul. Music is a means to do that. It's a way that we express our heart's longing for more of God, and for his presence to be manifest among us, for his kingdom to come in all its fullness. I also think good worship, if it's going to engage emotions appropriately, should create space as a consequence to hear from God and respond. You know, I think that in modern worship we may have lost a little, and that we've neglected, that traditional worship is a lot better at, is creating space for God to speak, creating space for us to hear what God is saying to us, not just to hear what the Spirit is saying to the church collective through someone who brings a word or something like that, but also to hear what God is saying to us personally. You know, I think we need both, and we need to create space for us. If we're going to worship God with all of our emotions, then of course it invites a response from our loving Father, and that response from him is going to call for a response from us, and so we need to create room for that. So for me, good worship is not about the absence of emotions. I don't see that as being worldly. I don't see that as being connected with entertainment in and of itself, but I think that if good worship stirs the emotions in order to connect with God, just the same as if we going back to what I talked about about worship and entertainment. If entertainment is by people for people and worship is to God for God, then when we confuse those lines, then inevitably we begin to be confused about the role of emotions and how to do that properly. So for me, good worship is never hyped, because that's not in keeping with the character of God. It's not rah, 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 go, go, go all the time. I think there has to be those rhythms to engage the emotions appropriately, create room for response, and all of those things. And I think there's room for variation of what that looks like. One size doesn't fit all. So for me, that's how I understand emotions in worship. Maybe you've got some perspectives which are different. Maybe you've got some added perspectives. Love to hear your thoughts. Drop us a line in the comments below, or you can email me, hamish@alc.org.nz. Love to have that conversation with you. Anyway, until next time, God bless.